Ba 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 ba. Do 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 do. Stop your messing around. You better think of your future. Do do do. Do 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 do. A message to you. A message to you. Do 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 do. Hmm. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. There we go. Oh, come on. Yo. Perpetual is perm time. Yo, what's up? We got Perpetual Pleasurist and we got Seb at the same time. That's crazy. We got Nefarious Rockers and we got Scott. Bing, bang, boom. How y'all doing this fine night? Sip. Howdy. I don't know if it's leggy for my interest.
Hey,
Hello, how's it going?
did you see that? And it's going fine. Did you see that on the TV? Maybe not, but
I wasn't really paying attention, but what was it?
it was this brain doping audio.
Ah,
I listened to it on the TV sometime, several times in a row.
howdy, Scott.
Hey, brethren. How goes it?
That's going pretty alright.
We got Seb, man, the baddest rocker that ever existed.
Thanks.
We're playing some of his music right now in the background. You can hear that.
That's awesome, man. You got some groovy guitar riffs, bro.
Thanks. And lately I've been noticing less, more of a clear consciousness, which I enjoy.
Cool, dude. What have you noticed about your clear consciousness? What inspired the clarity?
No, it's a literal clear consciousness, like that I don't have any brain fog.
Oh, you don't have any brain fog?
Yeah, not at all. Like before,
Oh.
I used to have a brain fog, and it used to be like this intense brain fog. But not anymore.
Is it just because like you smoked, or was it more just like because of medication, or just like you just had like this fog going on from like stress, or
Yeah, I took some terrible medication, but the reason I'm not too open about it, I would have been, but I don't like giving people that I like. I don't like to give trolls and haters ammunition, and I don't like to stimulate other people's. I don't like to stimulate other people's existence with some awareness on there, and that I'm having that I've had a bad time with brain fog. I'm sure a lot of people will derive pleasure But I was on these medications and have a lot of fun with it.
I mean, it's potential, but I don't think too many people would. I mean, it really depends, I suppose.
Yeah.
Potential, no!
Basically, oh no, potentiality.
Yeah, I was
And-
on. Yeah, I was on. I was on this. I'm not on the medication anymore. It's not in the blood. And the consciousness is way more clear.
Hmm. And you like that, I suppose, or
Yes.
okay? Oh yeah.
But I'm sure there may be people I hate that becomes aware of it, and then and just them knowing that will give them some pleasure, which I guess is a good thing for them. But I don't like giving haters pleasure from.
Yeah, getting troll pleasure is different than getting like love pleasure, at least in the eyes of Scott. In my eyes, it's the pleasure's pleasure, but fair enough. I
Yeah,
assume.
I guess. Yeah, I guess pleasure is pleasure to them, I guess, and for them it's a good thing. But I just don't uh, like that thought. Yes. So I guess I have a blog on Medium about the whole experience with the reduction of brain fog and stuff. I can put a link to it.
Hmm.
I don't have, but I go into more detail there.
Yeah, I used to get brain fog quite a bit when I'd smoke, but now I don't get brain fog anymore. So if you smoke enough or you take medication long enough, eventually your brain just gets used to it, and then you don't even realize you have brain fog, or you just get rid of it completely. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know if you get rid of it or if you just like get used to it, But moral of the story is I don't get brain fog anymore, or so I think.
Oh, oh yeah, but there is something I like to talk about. That
Oh yeah.
before I used to get something that I dubbed the super consciousness. That it's just the sensations and awareness was felt really strong. Like the senses, like the vision and the colors seemed way stronger and stuff. I'm planning on getting to that point in the future, and it's important to me that I'll pull it off this time.
What was it like for binaural beats?
Yeah, and
Ah, I gotcha.
I'm going on a streak. It's those two things.
Oh yeah.
Who was it that played that Nefarious Rocker song? Was it you, Antisocial? Was it you, Brant, or was it
Yeah,
you, PP?
that was me.
Mm, it must have been the one I sent to you.
Yeah, I was playing nursery rhymes. Scott, just so you know, you're muted. By the way, I don't know if you. Oh wait, never mind.
Oh
You're
yeah,
not
I
anymore.
was temporarily muted. I muted myself for a little bit.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
okay.
you were me.
I
But
was just
I
responding.
do enjoy your videos, PP.
What's that?
I have some of your videos and they're fun.
Oh,
But I
cool.
guess the ones that aren't too macabre, but but even those that are kind of, or I guess even those that are kind of gruesome and involves, yeah, the gruesome ones about the victims of things are, that I don't want to watch those, but I like the other ones.
Oh, I see. You said the ones talking about victims. You mean like torture victims and stuff? Those videos?
Yes.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Well, cool. I'm glad you get some inspiration.
I particularly like the ones where you talk about torture, if it makes you feel better. So,
Let's see. Lost
so
me a
Jake,
lit. Oh, what was that?
Oh, I just said I like the ones where you talk about torture. It's interesting and gruesome.
Yep. Yeah, different videos, different people's fancies. You know, certain days I'll be in a certain mood to record a certain topic, another mood to record another one. But it's all on my mind all the time, all at once, it seems like. So
Yeah.
I'll be like, well, which aspect do I want to focus on today? Well, let's talk about this one. Usually I laugh my ass off after I record my raging, ranting videos. A lot of those are actually intended to get people laughing, and it's my style of humor. But I think a lot of people miss the humor often. They think I'm actually more mad than I actually am. But I do a lot of that for effect, to exaggerate kind of the emotions and intensity. So I think that's missed on a lot of people, though. So when I'm like raving and ranting, motherfucker, it's actually supposed to be funny, but I think a lot of people miss that that's kind of the intent. It's not that I'm actually necessarily that angry. It's more like, God damn it, motherfucker! You fucking laughed your ass off right afterwards.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't really get angry too often, so when I seem angry, it's usually just theatrics.
Yep, that's mostly what it is for me, also.
Just don't have the energy to be angry at things.
But
Oh, go ahead, man.
yeah, I thought about the thing like being able to visualize all these things incessantly. That must be perhaps some kind of superhuman ability to like do
Well,
it all the time.
it's a hellish nightmare. I mean, yeah, it's just automatically always running in the background. I've just strategized to either tune myself out from it, obliviousness intentionally, or embracing sadism, because it's really all you can do with one of the two when you're aware of this stuff all the time. You can either be sadistic knowingly and consciously, or you can just tune out to it to some extent. That's about all there is to it. So I kind of bounced back and forth between both modes. It's like, all right,
Oh
tune
yeah,
out.
I used to one time.
Oh, go ahead.
I used to be aware of death a lot before, while at the same time having a death phobia.
Oh,
And
that'll do it.
it was
Yeah.
not a great thing I've been all the time of. But yeah, I'll switch to another device. This device has bad connection. I'll switch to another device and I'll be right back.
Oh,
Oh,
fair
okay.
enough.
But yeah, my thing is I'm a ruminator, man. I ruminate all the fucking time, and it's just a part of my existence. So I kind of just got in the groove of rumination and made it part of my jive, I guess you could say, part of my vibe. So basically, I've shifted my rumination into a healthy type of rumination to whatever degree that's actually possible. And that's pretty much how I go about processing things. It's always something I'm obsessing or fixating on.
I usually just ruminate on different philosophy bullshit, but I try not to think about philosophy too much. So I try to just get high and do random things. But even then, I can't really escape it because I have an ethical duty to do activism. So I'm like constantly like streaming or doing like shit. Like I went to the farmers market earlier today and was live streaming and also having conversations there. I don't know if you ever do you see any of those or
The ones where you're taping yourself going to different places, or
yeah.
yeah, I didn't really elaborate. I was going to look at the one today, but I didn't actually sit down and actually click on it. But I thought I saw your little smirk, and I was like, "Oh, I know what's gonna play out with this one." I did see the one little clip of Danny Shine and the toothless guy like raving at him. That was pretty fucking funny.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
hell yeah.
actually the one that screen recorded it and sent it to him.
He got the perfect fucking screenshot. That toothless guy just all pissed off. Yeah, Dad, I'll come over and beat your ass and blah blah. I was like, unfortunately, he doesn't realize that if he wasn't born, he wouldn't have to face being toothless. But it's like, just so fucking funny, man. He got like the perfect screenshot. The guy was like, he's like the British version of a redneck in the U.S. It's hilarious, man.
And yeah, I thought the woman too didn't seem to care that the man just threatened Danny. The woman just seemed pleased that.
Yeah, she didn't care at all. Well, that's the thing. Most people they're thinking what do you want to say? Violent threats towards Danny and all that other type of stuff. They just don't want to admit it most of the time, dude. That's all it comes down to, you know. And I'm trying to. Our brother here was saying, let's see here, Lost Neoplatonist. He was saying, I've been going through the trolling for years with Amendum. I just want to understand. So, Inmendum himself has been trolling you. Who's been trolling?
He's been going through the trolling through years. Same with Amendum, I guess. I think that's what he's saying.
So you've been trolling Inmendum, is what you're saying?
They're both been trolling, getting trolled, I think.
Oh, both of them have been getting trolled. I see.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. Well, that sucks ass. Trolls are always miserable to fucking deal with, that's for sure. That's why it's always good to talk to just directly, man. Because you notice how smooth that conversation was with Rita McLeod? I was like, like before previously he did like 3-hour like raging videos again, like responses to my stuff that I said after I was like swearing at like Epilist ideas and stuff like that. But if you just talk to somebody face to face, it's not an issue, man. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, man. Just gotta bring people together. It was all kumbaya then.
It was so fucking funny, dude. I was like, see, there you go. You don't actually hate me that much. I don't hate you at all, really. I never hate anybody. It's just ideologies that piss me off sometimes. Oh, for fuck's sake, man.
Like, he doesn't quite... Me and him can't understand how you're willing to, like... I mean, I understand everybody does it, but he doesn't understand how you're willing to like accept it as as a reality that we cause pain to other things and just to maintain our existences and like to like basically do it for excess pleasures. But he doesn't think it's ever technically worth it. So we both have disagreements a little bit, but for most part, we're not that much different. We're not that much different.
Well, my mindset is like, it's if you never think it's worth it, it's always going to be just back and forth bouncing around with depression or not. So it's like, well, may as well consider it worth it and not feel depressed. That's my philosophy.
That's true. I mean, in terms of like the egoistic side of it, it's true. But I don't know. I'm not much of an egoist. I'm more of like the sacrifice the self for the collective type of person.
Jesus Brant.
Jesus. Yes.
Brant Jesus. The sacred gillyfish has been sacrificed for the world, the sins of the world. The sins of the natalists.
The sins of the natalists.
I don't forgive you, motherfuckers, but here I am sacrificing myself to you. Basically. That's the right thing to do. Fuck you all. Oh!
That's pretty much me. It's just like I don't forgive any of them, and if it came down to it, I want to torture every single one of them personally. But like when it comes down to it, like I'm gonna do the right thing.
I picture like a piece of art with like your face and like you're on a cross with your middle finger sticking out. You got like a bunch of natalists throwing a bunch of nails at you and stuff or whatever. Oh man, dude, fucking hilarious. Horrible but hilarious.
That'll probably be how it'll go too.
Probably. Oh god, man.
Let's see. I think we have to impose a belief system of people so that's a threat or harassment. But we have a lot of suicides, so it's sad.
I love suicides. So, yeah. Suicides are sad, man. They always freaking are sad.
They are.
Horrible, you know. That's the thing. I want to get Mate has been pretty silent recently. I think I want to talk to him again in one of the live streams and see what he has to say about it. It's fucking hilarious because a lot of my friends that I know and stuff, a lot of the stuff I'll say, it'll be calling out some thing that I think they're saying or doing that's total bullshit or whatever, and then later on we'll just talk about it like the week after or something like that. Everybody like cools down. Oh man.
Who's Monty, by the way? I'm not sure. Do I know Monty?
Mate. Sorry, Mate Jacques. Femiurge conspiracy guy.
Yeah.
The reptilians are real. Yes. By the way. That's his most famous line. It's so cute. I love it when he says "by the way." It always cracks me up. By the way. There's an omni-malevolent Femiurge ruling over everything, every micro detail of all existence. Just the way he goes about it's fucking great, man.
I can't. I can't. That dude though. I mean, he believes some wild ass shit.
He does. It's always entertaining to me, man.
Entertaining, yeah, but I don't know, man. There's one thing that I kind of have like gripes with when it comes to is that antinatalists. A lot of them have mental illnesses, man. Like
it's true.
But I guess so do a lot of natalists too.
Yeah, that's true. But when it comes down to it, the natalists, I mean, they can get away with it. When you have such a fringe position, you have to kind of like pick and choose your battles and like what you believe and what you're willing to like stand up for. Otherwise, you just seem like too much of like you seem too out there. And there's a lot of people in the community who are just like believing in random ass shit. Like it just seems like they like reached into a hat with like a bunch of conspiracy theories and just like dug around in there and just like pulled out and like 5G. No, that's mainstream. And then they dug in further and they're just like, oh wow, lizard people. That seems spicy enough. And then it's just like, what the fuck? Like it's just as I was saying with Rita yesterday, like the real conspiracy is just like it's right in front of our eyes. It's just the conspiracy against the human race by Thomas Ligotti. It's just the existential dread of just like the meaninglessness. It's just constantly overriding all of our like hopes and shit. Like, constantly, it's just like slamming against all of your hopes, just like existential dread, just all the things you're doing. What is it for? What is the suffering for? You know, all that stuff. But you know, hey, you already know that though.
You've stolen my dreams away.
Oh my god,
man. Legend, bro. That's a great movie. Classic, man.
I Am Legend or just Legend?
Legend with the Demon Lord, the Lord of Darkness, man. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's the scene where she says, "You've stolen my dreams away," where basically he's stomping towards her and then trying to allure her to the dark side, basically. Yeah.
People told me today that I was just stomping their dreams away. Basically, they said I was making everybody sad when I was at the farmer's market, and I was just like, hey man, I'm not trying to make you guys sad. I'm just trying to make you guys aware of antinatalism. And they're like, you're making my day worse, though. You should leave. And I'm like, if it's making your day worse, then perhaps there's something to my message.
Exactly, man. Yeah. See, that's the thing. It doesn't make my day worse. When I hear stuff that's like solidly what reality consists of, to me, it calms me down and grounds me, man. Like, I don't see why. Well, I see why, but it's people, they they're not built the way that I'm built. So like when they hear stuff that is bringing them out of their oblivious state, it severely disturbs and agitates them. Whereas for me, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I don't feel depressed about it. But it's this weird conundrum with most people. Like, they like automatically feel depressed if they're exposed to vivid awareness of, hell, even just fucking baseline awareness of reality and stuff like that. It takes a shit ton of awareness for me to even begin to start feeling depressed. But I mean, that's what I noticed. Like throughout my life, I felt anger and sadness and irritation. It was mostly anger at how fucked up things were, but I rarely ever felt depressed about any of it. So it's not so much that I was ever really having a bad day per se. It was more just like pissed off at factually what is worth being pissed off at, you know. But the fact is, people in this world, they can't fucking handle being exposed to what's actually going on in reality. They have this fucking existential dread crisis that like consumes them immediately when you inform them of the reality of what they've actually been doing in their diet and their daily activities, lifestyle choices, etc. It just like eats away at them, you know. So it's like, hey, you're making my day worse, you need to go away. It's like, that's only making it worse because they're trying to hide and dodge from what's creeping up to devour them mentally and emotionally eventually anyway. You're just making the process smoother and more streamlined, but they don't see it that way. So when the dread and when the existential dread kicks in later, then they'll be like, oh, fuck, and then they won't be able to handle any of it. They'll lose their fucking minds, but like actually having conversations with you about it is beneficial for them because it'll maybe help temper down later on their existential dread from being worse, you know, hopefully, anyway. I think that's what it is, man. People just, they're always trying to dodge and avoid facing the existential horror that's always hanging in front of their face, you know, sleeping under their bed at night, etc. But
I guess if one has been Christian for some decades and then suddenly one gets the realization that atheism is correct and they will die someday. Yeah, that must come as a big shock to them. But,
I mean, it did have quite the effect on me. I mean, I became like suicidally depressed for like years on end, still am. So yeah, you're not wrong. It kind of just goes from like, oh, I don't need to think about anything. I just have purpose automatically installed into me because God loves me and God is purpose. Beep 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 boop be doo. I don't need to think. Just turn my brain off now. And then it goes from that to like constantly like, ah, why?
why?
Never
Well, for
ask
me-
me why to just constant why.
exactly. Well, see, for me, it's like for the why thing. For me, it's just like, oh yeah, of course, omnimalevolence. That's why. So for me, it's more just like, you know, getting in that groove of being adapted to omnimalevolent reality at all times versus. You know, it's like, even though at any time, I guess somebody could fall into that mode or whatever. For me, it's just like, all right, let me get in my little zone and stay in my zone here. You know, just truck forward. Yeah, it's a monstrous hellscape. Always has been, always will be. Fuck. So let's fucking rip through it and truck through it and be badasses while we're here as much as we can.
Mad
But
respect, but
like if someone were like when they were 5 year olds, when they were 5 year old, they were told how fucked up reality were, and they were introduced to it at an early age, compared to someone that is a Christian and then suddenly they're aware of atheism. I guess it won't come as a shock to someone who is a lifelong life hater and pain hater and stuff. But they have like a longer duration where it like lingers in them.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's like, man, it's so insane how much fucking hopium surrounds the world of Christian views and like when I was younger, man, it was just it was all copium crap all the time. Everybody was just, oh, Jesus is gonna save us and everything's gonna be hunky dory, and nobody ever deals with the question of, well, why the fuck? What the fuck? That is totally self-contradictory. There's no way a benevolent God would allow any of this to begin with in the first place.
Scott, how do you deal with people? Because I was at the farmer's market today, and I had a couple conversations. I always have them with religious people. How do you feel like the Rita also wants to know this because his mom is Baptist, Latter-day Saints, Mormon folk.
Yeah.
Like, how do you convince someone who believes that like your soul exists before you're born that like you shouldn't have a child anyways? Like, it just seems like impossible.
How do you convince someone that believes the soul existed before they were born?
Yeah, like that they like chose to come into the world, like into their body. Marco, I'll let you inside. Just chill out.
Well, you know what's interesting for me? It was so easy to convince of, like, that's actually for me one of the driving forces of why I especially took antinatalism seriously, because my view of the soul being eternal is, well, we could just be in paradise states and stay there and never take birth in bodies in the first place, which is basically the Hare Krishna narrative and stuff. So to me, it's especially absurd why anybody thinks it's at all an okay idea to allow any soul to be embodied in a temporal form for any reason whatsoever. But yeah, basically the whole narrative of they chose to come here, it's a variation on the whole mysterious purposes thing, where they actually have a physiological requirement to believe that all the torments will be rectified and reversed and altered and eliminated eventually. And they also have a physiological need to, it's a brain chemistry need actually in them, to have a narrative that ensures that they don't fall into a nightmarish depression. So as far as like convincing goes, it has a lot more to do with first getting them to recognize that there's a lack in divinity that causes the allowance of this fuck up of a soul being entrapped in a temporal state. So they recognize that a soul being trappable in a temporal state is a problem in and of itself, if you can talk with them at length enough about that. So getting them to recognize that, to really hone in on the facts that a soul being trapped in a body is a problem in and of itself. With LDS, it's especially weird and warped and difficult because they're like double ingrained in natalism, and the fact that they purposefully want to bring as many kids here as possible because they believe specifically that taking on a temporal body and a soul being entombed in a body is literally a requirement for that soul to attain a higher state, a godlike state afterwards. But if the soul is never entombed within a body temporally to go through those things, then it'll never actually directly attain exaltation. It will just remain this floating around soul at a very baseline degree of bliss, but it won't get to like higher levels and stuff. So in LDS country, it's especially absurd and bizarre because their narrative is like literally the exact fucking opposite of the antinatalist narrative. And it's really mind warped or mind fucked. The majority of LDS don't really actually believe the stuff. They just totally are in a mode of going through the motions completely. So it's, for them, it's like this immersion in this fairy tale land of, oh yeah, we're going to have eternal families and we're going to continue on hunky-dory and happy once we leave this state. And so the more you bring here, the more family members you'll have in the next celestial state and blah, blah, blah. So it's like this weird, cozy containment bubble that they feel super happy and comforted in while they're here, that, you know, they get themselves mentally hyped into just knowing is totally true and believing is true. And it's just, it's a lot of emotional hype stuff that drives that narrative, thus like tears at like the sermons and things like that. But it's mostly with antinatalism, it really is something a person has to individually just have click in them. It's not even really something that's what I've noticed. It's not really something you're able to convince others of unless they're already like inclined towards it already. And you just kind of like give them that extra little nudge in terms of encouragement in that. But if they're not there, they're just fucking not there, dude. It's like they're in a different headspace, you know? So that's why I always vouch for situational antinatalism, because it's a lot easier to get through to people that way versus ephilism or promortalism. And I find that's how I can at least marginally get across to people some themes and concepts of, because at least when I talk to theists and stuff, they at least appreciate where I'm coming from for the most part. But it's just a matter of them still not agreeing with me, even though they do grasp where I'm coming from, versus a lot of issue I see with like ephialists and promortalists. What they're encountering and running into is the people are actually oppositional to what they're suggesting. Whereas I don't really get that all that much from like theists and stuff. It's more just like, well, these are my beliefs. This is what I'm about. Therefore, I'm going to keep doing this. But they recognize usually the validity of what I'm getting across regarding the non-necessity of imposing a body on forms and stuff. So with LDS, I mean, since they believe directly that imposing a body on a soul is required for its exaltation, I mean, there's really only so far you can get with a person like that who's in that psychology, because, and not only that, the person specifically believes that Satan in particular is the being behind antinatalist narratives. He's literally the original antinatalist. So it's like the agenda of antinatalism to the LDS brain is exactly the satanic narrative of, no, let's keep souls outside of bodies forever. And that's literally what Satan's narrative was, directly. That was in opposition to quote-unquote God's narrative, Heavenly Father's narrative. Oh, no, we must. This is my will to implant all souls in bodies so that they can attain exaltation. And then Satan was just like, or Lucifer or whatever, he's just like, no, that's bullshit. Let's just keep them in paradise and not fiddle around with that bullshit. You know, and then, so I was like, fuck. Well, Satan, Lucifer, he had a much better fucking narrative than God did in the LDS narrative. He's more the good guy than fucking God was. So it's like, it's just so fucking bizarre. I remember talking to LDS folks for a while about that, and I was just like, you know what? It's like, but Satan's narrative in terms of what he's suggesting makes total sense. And they were going on, oh, but his narrative was driven by him being prideful. It was for his glory. And so I was like, so what? If Lucifer or Satan wants to have his ego stroked forever for ensuring that I didn't take a body to be entombed in and ensure that I stayed in a paradise state, so what? Like, I really don't care that a being is prideful or whatever. What does that matter, you know? But because that's something to be proud of. If you're the being who's suggesting, hey, let's not let people be entombed in bodies, that is something to be proud of. Like, why wouldn't he be proud of that? You know what I'm saying? It's so fucking absurd, man. So that's kind of when I say the demon narrative, I kind of especially do as a tongue-in-cheek kind of jab at the LDS narrative of I'm all for what they deem to be the satanic narrative of not entombing souls in bodies, basically. But it's really weird, man. You know, and that contributes to the pornography addiction directly that so many LDS people have, hypocritically behind closed doors. Biggest porn consumption in the U.S. is Utah, the capital of LDS ideologies. While they're in their doctrines, it's all about you can't even go beyond briefly giving a kiss on the lips, not even French kissing, just a peck on the lips. And that's literally as far as they ever allow anything to go if they're following their standards of dating or whatever.
Really? Okay.
I ran into a chick who was, oh, dude, it was weird. I ran into a chick who was following it to that standard, and it was very fucking bizarre. She admitted she'd go all out if there wasn't some religious narrative dictating that she don't go further with it, but it was just very weird. I mean, it's like, she was talking about like us staying at a hotel like a year afterwards and like having separate beds in the hotel, and I was like a year later after like into dating and separate beds, what the hell? Like, what what the fuck? And I could never. Eventually I figured out what it was, and I realized it's because she was adhering to that specific narrative, and I was like, this just isn't a romantic dynamic. If I can't do anything at all with you that's actually romantic, if all we ever do is just brief pecks on the lips and then you just run off and take off every time afterwards, like really abruptly, and we can't do anything beyond just basic like touching each other and barely that even. I mean, like, that's not even a romantic. It's just like platonic. Like, how do you establish anything romantic with somebody if that's all there is to it? It doesn't make any sense. It's just...
Yeah, I just had the thought of why people put up with stuff like that and restrict them, have a belief where they restrict themselves. It's like in the movie Limitless, Eddie Mora knows that the brother-in-law has NCT, the drug that causes super intelligence. So then the brother-in-law asks for a favor, and since he has NCT, of course, Eddie Mora has to do what he says and do whatever he can to get his hands on it. And it's kind of like that with believing in God. One has to do like this this huge favor, and because he has the ultimate drug, heaven.
Yeah.
Where I think one can get pleasure forever.
Yeah, it's like, it's all about the benefits afterwards. It's the daddy with benefits theme, It's like, and that's the thing. I noticed that most of them don't even actually believe it. They just do it for the hopium. Really, that's what it's about for people. It's the hopium. It isn't because they believe it. It's because there's some narrative that's giving them some bizarre sense of stability and certainty of something, even though they're not actually certain. It's the weirdest fucking conundrum, man, I've ever run into with the LDS stuff.
It's strange with that woman only wanted to do pecks on the lips. It's like if in certain situations, men and women alike have been attracted to someone so much that they even cheat because the drive is just so strong, even though it goes against their partner's wishes, but they can't go against God. That
Right.
must be some powerful, like, religious commitment she has.
Right. It's like, what's the term I was looking for? It's very clear to me exactly what's going on in the religious psychology, because when I was younger, I used to have it myself but my rumination and my fixation on these specific key questions never stopped. So it was just a matter of time before I shifted out of the stuff. And I would always be willing to actually talk with people about their other concepts and ideas, and I understood the rationale in what they were suggesting and stuff. So what I was doing when I was younger, I was mind-fucking myself, like, way more layers into stuff that wasn't even written in scriptures and stuff. Like, I was figuring out my own reasons and causational factors for all this type of stuff, like, in my own head, that was never even mentioned in scriptures, because I was that serious for fucking answers and shit. But I recognized that, yeah, I mean, the root issue is that we're dealing with an entity that's not omnibenevolent. That was so obvious to me, I could never shake off that awareness. We're getting told that this thing is entirely benevolent, but that's so clearly not the case. You can just observe that that's not the case. And realistically, we're dealing with something that's specifically malevolent in particular, or just not attentive at all, completely cold and uncaring entirely. I mean, amputees never growing limbs back, the fact we don't have it in our genetics to grow limbs back and stuff, even basic ass shit like that, just not there. It's crazy, man. So it's like, it's nuts. And that whole fucking rabbit hole of the, fuck, man. Are you guys familiar with the rabbit hole of what the Nazis actually believed and what they were actually trying to do in relationship to the Talmudic agenda stuff and how that all went haywire? But how it was actually based on, minus the fanaticism and crazy shit, like an actual historical observation of like what was actually happening. Really fucking weird rabbit hole, man. But
no, I haven't really heard much about
I haven't.
so basically, I don't know if you've seen my recent video. There's clearly a verifiable pattern of the banking system being run by specific types of individuals. And you can confirm this via the scripture itself, the Babylonian Talmud, what it says in there. It's all about the money, the business, screwing over the Goyim and everything else. Anybody who's not Yahudim, genetically, etc. Yahudim being, of course, the historical term, the term that they actually use in their own language to refer to themselves as, aside from the three-letter word, but in the more accurate ethnic term. But the weird part is, like, so there was actually that going on in Germany. Like, their banking system was actually being screwed with. So he was able to convince everybody and get them so fanatic and fired up like that because they were pissed off about something that was more or less actually happening. Like, a certain subset of them were actually doing that. And when that uproar kicked in, it just took a life of its own. And then what happened was everybody themselves went overboard and became these racist fanatic nut jobs and stuff. But if they had just not done that, if they had just not taken to racism and stuck with the awareness of, okay, the banking systems have been infiltrated in this way, let's stop it there and just move forward with fixing things economically and otherwise, minus the racist narrative attached to it, they could have actually been very successful, and there wouldn't have ended up being a war or anything like that. But the problem is they fell into the racist trap, and this is what keeps happening over and over and over again, repeatedly. But if people can just recognize that agenda, what it is, and not have their own religious or fanatical agenda directed at the Yahudim that's also equally as bad, then you can actually fix the problems in the world very quickly. Specifically, the Yahudim that are the ones involved in believing that racist narrative and being involved in finances and banking and stuff like that. So it's pretty clear to see what's going on there, but the majority of people just don't understand it. They don't get the nuances to it. And so thus the story goes. Thus things continue on the way they are. And the Aldebaran, there was supposedly this mystic chick within the German the Vril Society who contacted these extraterrestrials from the Aldebaran star system, the planet around there, and it was like channeling these messages, so like cuneiform, Sumerian, Germanic ruins, and supposedly that's how they got in contact with like UFO technology or whatever, and were building the prototypes based off of that. Really interesting story. And then of course leading to Operation High Jump and all that type of stuff. So very intriguing to me whether there was some actual contact with some beings out there or not. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but there had to have been some weird thing going on like that, because I mean, fuck, the fact that they actually had prototypes built of these things, like the saucers and stuff, and that is well known and documented. It's very intriguing. You know, it's thought that the what happened was the parts to these flying saucers were put on the ships that were driven down to New Swabenland in Antarctica and also Argentina, and they reassembled them down there, and those were the ones that were used against Admiral Byrd when he sailed down to go after them, basically. So yeah, so because they were claiming they were fighting against these flying saucers, specifically 2 of them, I think it was the number, and yeah, they were getting shot at, blasted at, and everything else. So it's very plausible that the schematics and the parts from those saucers prototypes got taken down there to Antarctica in the 40s via those submarines, those U-boats and stuff, and they put them together and freaking used them on Admiral Byrd and the guy sailing down there. and that's what caused them to abandon Operation High Jump. So it's quite a mystery what happened to the groups, those Nazis who went down to Antarctica. Where'd they go? What happened to them? Are they still out there? Did they establish a permanent base? Nobody really knows. It's a big fucking question mark, you know? But the fact that they had prototypes, and the fact that prototypes of, you know, saucers, or that design, was being used against Admiral Byrd, and that's what the report was. I mean, it's like you kind of put the two and two together, and it's like, fuck, man. Are those the UFOs that have been flying around since then, all the way up until today? Is it the same fucking things? You know?
Just Nazis. Just kidding.
Seems awfully terrible to have bases in Antarctica. Seems cold, and I guess one can go penguin hunting, I guess.
Quite frigid. Well, realistically, I mean, they probably would have went down there, and then after that incident with Admiral Byrd, they probably would have from there took back over to Argentina, which is a little more habitable and stuff like that, and then just, you know. But who knows? It's really intriguing, man. Then there's the whole hollow Earth concept, or at least not necessarily entirely hollow Earth, but like inner Earth cave system ideas or whatever. That stuff is always fascinating to me, thinking about what could be going on with that.
Reminds me of the book Tunnels.
What's it called?
Tunnels. It's
Tunnel?
yeah, it's like a kid's book, but it's about like some kid that like finds this like tunnel going underneath his house, and leads like this underground civilization that like goes to like hollow Earth stuff, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool. Every kid's dream come true, man.
Basically, the
Well-
Earth ended up being a giant spaceship in the end. You know, it was like, what the fuck?
You want a really insane rabbit hole? Richard Shaver's books, man. The I Remember Lemuria, dude. That's some trippy shit, man. His narrative was that the gigantic races that used to live on Earth, they took off from Earth because they had to escape the sun poison, because the sun burned through its like outer layer of carbon, which ensured that it only gave off like beneficial light and radiation, but without the toxic nuclear shit blasting us. And then there was one of the Titans left inside the fucking Earth that got like mutated and warped by the rays. So the Nors or whatever had to come back and kill him, take him out, and then they took off again. And the idea was basically that the rest of us were the spawn of the abandoned humans on the surface that were just left here to rot, basically, as all the other early inhabitants had to take off from our solar system out into dark space, or other solar systems where there's new suns and stuff like that. Really trippy hypothesis and concept, and he was very certain himself, very adamant that the narrative was actually correct and true, and that there's these cave systems underneath the ground where you still got these malevolent beings called Dero who are still blasting these rays up on the surface, you know, fucking with people's minds and shit. And I was like, you know, it's very interesting as a story. Kept me entertained for a long time, actually. Every time I read it, I'm still re-fascinated. For some reason, I can't seem to pull myself away when I start reading this stuff again. So I don't know. I think he's onto something. Whether the actual story itself was true or not, that's up to debate. But the framework that he's mentioning seems quite plausible. It seems very intriguing, because we know that the sun's radiation does damage us and kill us gradually, even though we have a certain amount of immunity to it. So it's not instant, but it does kill us fairly fast. So if you had like a sun emanating non-poisonous radiation from it, if it could somehow just emanate beneficial rays only, well, you could bypass a lot of the aging process pretty much entirely, and then that would contribute to your continual growth and stuff. So he was saying these beings that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so they couldn't even be on Earth anymore. They had to take off because they just kept getting larger. The main thing, of course, that is that's kind of the big hole in his explanation is that, well, surely we would find at least a certain amount of gigantic skeletons throughout the world, like in quite notable numbers. I mean, because there's no way all these giants would have escaped the Earth and taken off.
True. Yeah.
But there's just, I mean, and that would be way too hard to cover that up. Like, you would be, because you'd have independent people finding fucking skeletons and shit like this.
Plus, doesn't like giganticism like lead to like blood flow like lacking and stuff like that, and like a bunch of random shit that like.
Well, in the mutated version, yeah, but according to what he was saying, this was like a healthy form of growth where their body just kept getting bigger in proportion. So it wasn't like gigantism of like the mutated type where it's like the bad health version. But
Okay.
I mean, yeah, that's the main thing, because he was saying they were living underneath underneath the ground, and Teen City or Tian City was one of the main cities, and like the walls were like super hardened with like rays and all this other stuff. And he was claiming there was a layer of like no gravity at all, or like super lightweightness, but at like the midpoint between like the core of the Earth and like the upper surface, where it's like super, light, so where you can walk around with ease without the weight and shit like bogging you down. So, it'd be interesting if what he was saying was true. It's just like, where's the fucking giant skeletons and stuff, man? There would be more of them around if they were actually here, according to what he was describing. So it's very disappointing.
And if they're limiting themselves to be underground, how do they get? It seems harder to get rocket fuel. I guess they could have had oil rigs or something underground there, but
well, he was saying the technology, actually, they had these. They figured out the technology how to like skip forward, like zip really fast through space and stuff like that, without the need for the stuff we use in terms of fuel and things like that now. Like similar to the technology that scientists are now actually on the brink of discovering and uncovering, the whole like warp drive technology stuff, where you can have something go like really fast through space-time to where you really don't need rocket fuel and stuff like that. So supposedly they'd perfected that technology and stuff, and there's a place called Quanto that was the 11th planet within our solar system at the way outer outskirts of it. That's basically out in dark space, but still technically part of our solar system, to where the Nortons, they were living in self-contained ships and stuff, where they generated all their own nutrients and everything they needed, really, and they shunned being near suns entirely, basically. And they were, blonde-haired and light-skinned and all this other type of stuff. And then, of course, you had the Atlans and Titans that he was talking about. Just absolutely fascinating. I mean, fuck, man. Even if it's within the realm of science fiction or something, it's probably the best science fiction I've ever read compared to other stuff that I've seen. But the whole Shaver mystery, it was attached. There was like hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world that got on board, and they were saying, "Oh yes, I've had encounters with these underground races, and I've had all this stuff happen to me," and blah blah blah. And there's tons of like letters pouring in to amazing stories, and just like this mass hysteria in relationship to it. And then when Richard Shaver passed, the whole thing just kind of like gradually flickered out. It was interesting because what was interesting about it was he was the only author claiming that it was all completely true, but he was forced to publish it through a science fiction medium, whereas everybody else in the science fiction world was not claiming that, and they were all getting pissed off at him and stuff for saying it was real. And so it's a really interesting history to study, actually, of people's psychology and like what do you call it, the pulp fiction of like the 1930s and 1940s cultural scene that was going on at the time. The point is, we're left here to rot, though. It's like where are they now? Well, they're not here taking care of us now. They're not around now, so we're basically fucked, having to deal with all this bullshit and radiation and all this other crap.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I think people believe a lot of weird shit. I mean, even today when I was at the farmer's market, some lady talked to me for a little bit, was religious as hell. She walked away, and I was like, okay, she's a bat, whatever, though. She comes back like 5 minutes later up to me and goes, I had a premonition from God, and he told me that your parents are very sad and that you need to stop worshiping death, and I'm praying for you. have a good day, and then she like walked away. So moral of the story is there's literally people out here believing that like God's talking to them, like, you know. So
Yeah.
and
We're
so
shooting stuff. We're shooting death. I mean, that's like a movie scene, man. That's fucking hilarious.
But
it was
I
hilarious.
got the suspicion that she said that you just try to hurt your feelings. That's what I thought.
Probably, but you know, she seemed pretty animate, so I wouldn't doubt she had like schizophrenia or some shit. So
Well, that's what I noticed. Schizophrenics, they tend to be the most hyper-religious people of all, or the most hyper-conspiratorial, because that's why actually that was, dude, that's one of the major things that actually caused me to spiral really fast out of anything religious at all, and out of pretty much anything spiritual, quote unquote, entirely, was when I lived with for a while a person diagnosed with schizoaffective, which is not directly paranoid schizophrenia, but it's similar in certain ways. But it's a more like friendlier, milder version, not as like aggressive and fucking paranoid. But it's a lot of the same things they go through psychologically. And I was able to determine, I was like, wait a minute. All this is doing is it's doing nothing but agitating and making worse and compounding this schizophrenic person's worldview, narrative, and everything else. It's not helping anything. It's just making everything worse. So if the result is that everything that's already off is made worse as soon as they come in contact with religion, in every single case of a paranoid schizophrenic or every schizo person I've ever encountered, that tells me everything I need to know. Because I'm like, if this stuff was actually beneficial or helpful or healthy, it wouldn't be having this consistent adverse effect of fanaticism on every schizophrenic who comes in contact with it. So it's like, wait a minute. So I put the two and two together, the patterns and stuff, and I was like, well, shit, of course, that's exactly what's been going on with it. You have a history of people historically who probably were that, undiagnosed throughout the ages, and they were the fanatics. They were the ones hyper-religious and hyper, into all that shit. And it's just been ongoing for fucking age after age after age. And here we are now, And so what I looked at, I was like, wait a minute. When I got the paranoid schizophrenics, like my friend, when I convinced, okay, what you need to do is you need to just focus on and have this as your only criteria, period. What is directly, clearly pleasurable in obvious ways to you and others, that is good. That is, quote unquote, what you can deem spiritual and beneficial and everything else. Anything that isn't clearly and obviously beneficial to you and others in obvious ways, in clear, obvious, pleasurable ways, that is not good, that is bad, that's awful. And every time I've talked this way and explained this to the schizophrenic, they always started feeling better and their symptoms would mild down, and they would mention this to me when they kept looking at things that way. But they had this overwhelming urge to attach the narrative and the story back to things, and as soon as they attached a narrative or story, then their mind got all jumbled up again, and they were always going back and forth, what is actually good, what is actually right, and they were ruminating and all this other shit. And I was like, oh, well, fuck, that's what it is. It's literally the fucking narrative is the problem. So the narrative, the story, whatever it is, that's attached to whatever they're doing, and every religion is a narrative, it's a story, right? That's the problem, because it interferes with their ability to clearly distinguish what is clearly benevolent and what isn't in obvious terms. So because their brain is already jumbled up with all these different mix-ups of what is actually real and what isn't, how to distinguish and stuff, anything religious or spiritual just fucking compounds the issues. And that's why I started tailoring my explanations of videos and stuff to, okay, this explanation is for people who are not diagnosed on the paranoid schizophrenic spectrum, and then I would do a separate explanation for people who are diagnosed on that spectrum of the same thing, just in different wordings, minus the narratives. And I explained why that was so important. So it's really something therapists could actually adopt in interacting with paranoid schizophrenics, and they would get a lot further with them, and they would achieve a lot more, I think, effective results versus any degree of catering to at all their spiritual narratives or anything like this, because it sure as hell isn't going to help them. But when I had that experience of living with one, I was like, holy shit, that's the answer to my questions right there. Religion is the fucking thing that's been perpetuated and driven by those types of people psychologically throughout history. And that's where, you know, all the visions, they can't distinguish what is baseline reality from their visions and imaginings and stuff. That's really the defining trait. I mean, if you're not a paranoid schizophrenic, you're always aware of the difference. You'll have experiences, right? Even experiences you could deem supernatural or whatever, but you're always vividly aware of the distinction between that experience and baseline reality here. But the paranoid schizophrenic or other people on the schizophrenic spectrum, they can't clearly distinguish the two, so it becomes this jumbled mess of like they'll mistake their vision or whatever as baseline reality, and it'll become this jumbled up mind fuck. Whereas other people not on the spectrum don't actually run into that issue, you know, having the same experiences. So, and that's why I think, you know, people on the autism spectrum tend to clash. This is what I've heard, and it actually makes sense with people on the schizophrenic spectrum, because one of them is recognizing the distinction between the experiences, the other one isn't. So you have this clash between the magical idealistic thinking of the schizophrenic and then the grounded, you know, separation of baseline reality distinct from ideal reality within the autistic brain, right? So yeah, it's really interesting, man. It's really fascinating.
I mean, I suppose it makes sense. I get in a lot of arguments with people with with both autism and schizophrenia, but usually more schizophrenia.
Yeah. It's the pattern's always the same too. It's like the paranoid schizophrenic is no matter what, he's always paranoid of everybody. Like whether you're a friend, whether you're a relative, romantic partner, it's the paranoia just never goes away. And they can't recognize that it's paranoia. They think they actually believe that others are out to get them or others are conniving and scheming against them. And they genuinely feel that way. It's not even like it doesn't register that they're hyping or exaggerating the degree to which that is going on, etc. It's just boom, there it is. And did you guys hear about that test with the mask that spins around, and only the paranoid schizophrenic sees visually that it's the back of the mask, but he doesn't see the front. Like if you type on YouTube the schizophrenic mask experiment or whatever it is, there's this mask that'll, if somebody's not on the schizophrenic spectrum, you can know in your brain that you're looking at the back of the mask, but it looks like it's the front of the face is sticking out, like it's not indented in, right? And your brain, no matter how much you're aware that it's actually the backside of the mask, you always keep seeing visually it looked like the mask is sticking out. But the paranoid schizophrenic, that doesn't happen in their brain. Like when it spins around, they visually still keep seeing an indentation, and they don't actually see the mask sticking out towards them. It's really interesting. It's really like bizarre fucking visual experiments and stuff like that. So I looked at the YouTube video, and sure enough, it's very clear I'm not on the paranoids or the schizophrenic spectrum, because no matter how much I knew I was looking at the back of the fucking thing, I kept seeing it visually as sticking out towards me. So I was like, well, I'm obviously not on the schizophrenic spectrum then, because, you know, my brain couldn't bring itself to like see visually the mask being indented, you know, pointing away from me, no matter how much I was aware that it was, you know. So I was like, that's really intriguing, actually. And I think what it was showing was the fact that in other brains, there's this ability of us to meld, like, what our brain expects in terms of like putting additional things together in a convenient way, where the paranoid schizophrenic's brain doesn't do that. So things like remain separated out, and it contributes to them basically having this narrative of, oh, that person is my enemy or ally. It's like this black and white and everything. It's like that's either the front of the mask or the back. There's none of this like filling in the blank things going on. It's just continual black and white thinking towards everything. So it removes the nuance factor from their thinking, to where it's just like enemy, opponent, attacker, friend, enemy, opponent, attacker, friend, and then friend also potentially enemy later on. And just there's none of this suspension of disbelief that goes on really for them. It's just kind of like when you're watching a movie, you have suspension of disbelief, even though you know it's fiction. Yeah, that kind of a dynamic. But yeah, it's fascinating, man. Definitely an interesting video to look at on YouTube. So if you like, and it proved true, at least in my case. It's like, well, I'm not on the schizophrenic spectrum. I can't.
There was this time I was walking to the neighborhood while having taken psilocybin in a moderate dose, and then there was this woman who went on a jog, and I told my friend, "Oh no, this is the enemy." So
This is the enemy. Were you joking, or were you like?
I
Were you serious at that time?
I think I didn't think she was going to attack me, but I had limited capacity for language since I was on a good amount of it, so that was the only thing I could say to express that she posed a danger, I think. But I don't think she would have attacked me or anything, but the worst she could do was to get me in trouble.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Well, I mean, within the black pill fold, the narrative of all women being the demonic evil enemy is quite common nowadays. So that's and it's understandable how those hype train narratives have built and formed. I mean, you got huge numbers of sexually depressed and angry and stressed men for legitimate reason. I mean, women not talking to them, interacting, screwing around with them, backstabbing them, using them, not actually caring about them. What me, Rita, and Brant talked about the other day.
Yeah, it was a good conversation.
And so, I mean, yeah, it's understandable why guys are in that zone or in that mode, but it's just an unhealthy zone for guys to allow themselves to seethe in and ruminate in, because then you end up having fucking, mass shootings and shit like that kick off from those kinds of things. The whole incel insanity and shit like that. It just goes out of control, man. Nutty, bros.
Praise be. Well, it is getting pretty late here. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or in the last couple minutes here? Otherwise, I'm gonna probably close out the stream.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, that's about it for me, man. What about you, Seb?
Yeah, I guess it would be useful. Maybe I could ask you what you think about the whole NoFap thing, and I guess the both of you, I haven't asked you about it yet due to the typical awkwardness of the topic, and what one can do to get on higher streaks, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it'd be an interesting topic to talk about in some other live streams and stuff. I know for a fact I've got other friends who are just drilling at the mouth to talk about that topic. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, your friend
Mate Jacques, he's all about that shit.
Yeah, he's all about that.
Whenever I have Mate on and Brant's like watching, I always crack up because I know what's going through Brant's head as Mate is speaking.
It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. Funny, man. All right, dudes. Well, good talking to you guys. I hope you guys have a good night, man.
Yeah, y'all have a good night.
Thanks.
Ciao.